Kia ora and welcome to today's episode of the DisruptED interviews. I've got a special guest today. Today we have Katrina who is at the Taranaki Diocesan School for Girls, which is in Stratford. And I've just been getting a geography lesson to learn where that is because I clearly had no idea. Katrina, those of you who follow the DisruptED Facebook group will have seen Katrina's recent post about her journey through using agile and lean methodology, and particularly how it's applied in this sort of period of change that we're experiencing at the moment. So I'm going to let Katrina introduce herself and explain a little bit more about her context and the journey that she's been on so far. So welcome, Katrina. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Awesome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your context and your journey into this use of agile and lean methodology?
Yep, so I'm the Principal's nominee and teacher in charge of visual arts at Taranaki Diocesan. And I used to be the postgrad facilitator for the Mind Lab, teaching the postgrad certificate in digital and collaborative learning. And when I was working for Mind Lab, I just really got really interested in lean and agile teaching and learning and how to apply those methodologies to different contexts. And now that I'm back into secondary teaching, I've just been researching it further and putting it into practice. And I feel like it's really useful for remote learning.
Awesome. So for those who are not that familiar with the concepts of lean and agile, can you give us a bit of a once-over lightly about those concepts and how they apply to teaching and learning?
So agile education is comes out of software development, and it's about kind of making things easy in terms of iterative procedures and looking at processes rather than products. So in an educational context, it's things like putting the learner first instead of thinking about assessment, thinking about process rather than product. Making sure that there's lots of room for iterative change and teaching to demand rather than teaching to a fixed lesson plan. So for me, being agile in the classroom, it means that I don't necessarily plan lessons ahead, but I respond to what learners need in the moment. So I co-construct resources with students in real time. So that's kind of where agile sits for me in education. And then for lean, it is about waste reduction. So rather than providing a whole lot of written material for students to read and have difficulty digesting, it's about kind of paring everything back to its essential form. So a nice way to understand it is if you were writing a business plan, you might write a 20-page business plan, but with lean methodology, you should just be able to write that with a one-page cover sheet. And with that in mind, it means that you're writing something that can be responding to change, because by the time you've written a 20-page business plan, probably your business plan has changed.
Yeah, so and that's where that concept of the lean canvas comes in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So sort of a one-page visual sort of map of the journey that you're going to go on. And I know that people quite often use agile and lean methodology with project-based learning. It's sort of a natural fit, and it's a sort of a complement and extension of design thinking, and it sits in the same world, in the same space, and it interacts with each other. And I can totally see that why that would be so powerful in this particular current context, because the first thing we talked about when we moved into the remote was the fact that everything had to get pared back. Yeah, absolutely. That idea that actually there wasn't going to be the room for all the fat and the busy work and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. And also, I think I really like the connection between agile, and we often talk in education around adaptive expertise. And I can see how that agile methodology is, in a way, it's a process and a strategy that enables that adaptive expertise in education. So what's that looked like in your specific context? You teach visual arts, and a mixture of visual arts and digital technology, or all visual arts?
Yeah, so my background's in English and art history and art, and now I teach predominantly visual arts and digital technology, but not as a subject. My role is how to weave digital technology into all of the other subjects. And I also teach social studies this year, which is a bit new for me as well. But for me, I've worked out that if I start on a Monday with kind of a needs analysis and I do a 5-minute stand up, which is basically getting all the students in a circle and going, hey, what are you working on? What are you struggling with? Where's your well-being at on a 1 to 10 ranking? And what can I help you with? Then that means that I'm getting a really nice picture of what all of the students are working on. And I can immediately write a list of tasks that are based on their needs that I can respond to in that lesson.
Yep.
Yep. And then from there, the girls then design miniature tasks or lean tasks, which we call work sprints, which are nice chunked activities that they can do within 10 or 20 minutes, and then they can reflect on their success after that 10 or 20 minute work sprint. So other people might call it time boxing. Yeah.
So that's tied up with that concept. Like I know in the computer world, they always talk about chunking tasks and making them give. And what's your reason for doing that? Your reason for doing that is so they get a sense of success, but also it's a good technical strategy for self-management, I guess.
It's also ties in with computational thinking from a digital technology perspective. So if we were designing an algorithm, then we'd need to break a task down into the smallest steps possible and then put them into sequence and then work out what the actual appropriate order of things is, which is where the algorithm would come in. For the students, it means that they can get a sense of success, but they can also have something that's achievable and measurable, and that they've got something that's incremental so that they can get teacher feedback that's really timely.
Yeah, awesome. So you on the DisruptED page, you shared that chart that took us through a Monday through Friday. I mean, obviously it wouldn't always be that linear. It would depend on the situation, but for the sake of structuring your online week, I can see that Monday to Friday timeline would be really powerful. Can you just take us quickly through that Monday to Friday?
So for the quick Monday to Friday idea using Agile and Lean, we'd start with a stand up, which is, you know, what are you working on? What are the tasks that you'd like to work on? And then the students might quickly write a list of work sprints that they'd like to achieve, hopefully in an appropriate order, which is a little bit of sequencing as well. And then they would start designing and developing, presumably a digital outcome, but also an analog one would be fine as well. So, for example, if they were reading a text, then they might want to design a PowerPoint that explores some ideas in the text, or they might want to design a poster, or they might want to design an immersive world in a virtual reality program. And then on a Thursday, they might show it to me, and then we would have a look at it and I'd give them some feedback. But I wouldn't be expecting a finished product. This is where the rapid prototyping comes in. So it would be, this is what I'd like to do. If I had lots of time, they can show it to me, I can respond, and then they can continue with that iteration in the following week. And then I tend to do kind of like a fun Friday, and on a Friday they then can self-manage and decide on something that they're interested in. So for example, if it's a photography student, they've always wanted to learn about levitation and how to make someone look like they're levitating in a photo, then they might be exploring Photoshop tutorials on a Friday, so that then the following week when we do our stand-up, they're going to say, well, this week I'm going to try and do levitation. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this makes total sense. And I think there's so much of this that could be really powerful in so many different contexts. Like, you know, I immediately see how this would be really powerful and for our context at Albany Senior High School with our ways that we structure our Wednesdays instead of in terms of full day projects and wanting to chunk up that time, obviously over the day and from week to week. But I can see how this could apply in any context, either remote or in the classroom for any subject. And I guess that's part of the appeal, isn't it? That it is so transferable in terms of a skill set. So with these strategies you were already using in the classroom face-to-face before going remote?
Yeah, so these are strategies that I've been using for 3 years now. So in my classes, I've had mixed levels and mixed disciplines. So in one class, for example, I might have had 11 art, 12 painting, 12 design, 12 photography, 13 design, and 13 painting in one session. So at face value, that looks impossible, but actually when they're all working on individual projects and we're all keeping to the same kind of system, you know, what are your tasks? We can all figure out what those steps are. How can we debug them together? We can do that together. What is our sequence? We can do that. When do I need feedback from my teacher? We can do that. So even though I was teaching lots of completely different concepts and activities, they all could be taught at the same time in the same space.
Yeah, so that you're sort of taking on the role of a coach that's supporting them through their sort of agile processes. And do you use this as well for the assessments for NCA? Because I can imagine that a lean canvas could actually be a really neat way to give them a template for co-designing NCA tasks as well.
Yeah, I've basically broken down all of the achievement standards into chunks. So I know you were talking in a previous interview about universal design for learning, and I've had some students on the autism spectrum and I've had some dyslexic students, and they really work well with really chunked, you know, smaller tasks.
Yeah.
But what I've also got the students thinking about is, what is the purpose of this particular part of the activity? What do I need to do? What do I need to show? What am I showing that I understand in terms of the achievement criteria? And that actually means that they've got a lot of freedom to design a task that still fits the achievement criteria, but isn't too rigid.
Yeah, and I can imagine as well, like often when people think about designing tasks or designing learning activity for students with diverse learning needs, they feel like they often need to do a lot of that work for them. Whereas, in fact, if you create the right kind of template and framework, you can still be co-designing it with learners with all kinds of diverse learning needs, can't you? And have you found that to be quite effective?
Yeah, I've for those students who need a lot of scaffolding, I've almost written it out like a flow chart that they can colour in the boxes as they achieve the tasks. But then I've also left some boxes empty, which is where they get to design their own task within that flow.
Yeah, so I can imagine that actually the approach that you've taken could be really powerful. Like we've had several times now people comment on how they meet the needs for diverse learners in a remote setting, because I think often we rely on our face-to-face relationships with those students and being able to quietly get alongside those students while other students are getting on with their work and supporting that stuff in real time in a physical space. So how would you manage, I don't know if that makes sense, but how might you manage that in a digital context with a student with diverse learning needs?
So I might give less options for that student. So I might do a this or that opportunity rather than a here's 20 activities and you can choose the one that you want to do. So this or that, and then also maybe when and then. So when you've done this, then you can do this. So kind of just supporting them so that they can see that they are making progress, and maybe even offering some gamification aspects as well. So maybe leveling up and offering badges and those kinds of things with game theory.
Oh, awesome.
Just kind of motivate them a little bit more.
So talk to me a little bit more about game theory. Is that something that you did in your MindLab context as well, or is that something that you've come to on your own?
So we do teach the gamification in the postgrad course for the MindLab. So it is definitely a motivator. So in my classroom, I also have badges for rewarding students for certain tasks. And it's almost like the 3-level guide, but it may just be that you get rewarded. And in our LMS, we use Schoology. You can award badges for certain tasks or certain skills or critical thinking or whatever is appropriate.
And I'm pretty sure that regardless of whatever platform, I know there's a lot of platforms you can go to that actually help you design digital badges to award in any given context. So for those students that might have diverse learning needs, would you potentially map out, say on a single document or drawing, the journey for them physically, rather than, because I find the thing that can be really challenging for students in an online environment is they can get overwhelmed of information, and
Sorry.
No, you go.
I think in that case, I would have the full document for myself and available for the students, but I would probably provide that student with just one or two chunks at a time, because you're right, it's overwhelming. No student wants to have a 10-page document in front of them if they're not comfortable with reading, for example, if they're dyslexic or dyscalculic, or if they've got something like Erlands, that's not going to be a motivating strategy.
And in terms of, I'm really interested in this sort of space that you're working in terms of supporting, so you're in visual arts and digital technology, in terms of finding resources and strategies that are offering those sort of multi-modes of providing information and supporting learning. What are the different places and spaces that you're gathering your resources from? Because I think it's important that people are often a bit scared of universal design for learning and providing different modes and methods, because I think it's a whole lot of work, whereas I've often found it's about a whole lot of curation rather than a whole lot of work. So how do you resource your teaching and learning when you think about those students with diverse learning needs?
A lot of my resources I do make from scratch, but I also just try and stay networked. So I'm always contacting old colleagues that I've worked with, or I'm asking on Facebook groups, what's a good tool for this particular learning outcome that I'm struggling with. And in general, people are really happy to share their ideas, and then, like you say, you can curate it into a single document. And once you do it once, it's done, unless the links fail or the software becomes a paid software element rather than a free one or something like that, then it's work that you do once, and then you can just keep referring to it and adding to it.
Yeah, and just keep collectively adding to your toolkit. Okay, I'm mindful of time, and I'm with these ones, I always feel I can go down about 10 million rabbit holes, and we can keep going and going. So I have a feeling that this will be a topic that will really pique people's interest. What are some ways that they can find out more, about the work that you're doing, but where else might they go to find out about that sort of agile and lean methodology that you've been talking about as well?
So PEHA in 2011 is responsible for the Agile Education Manifesto. So that's one place to do some initial reading. Otherwise, Googling Agile in Education is a really good start. I've got my research in sort of a 3/4 finished space, so I'll be publishing something soon. And otherwise, people can just, feel free to just ask me some questions if they've got specific questions around how I do this, or maybe they don't understand some of the terminology and the infographic.
Awesome. So if they're in the DisruptED group on Facebook, I know you're in there, but you're also reachable on Twitter as well. And I'll get you to share with me a couple of links, and we'll share that in the description of this interview as well. So thank you so much for making time for me today, Katrina. That's been an absolutely fascinating interview, and I feel like it's one that we've probably just scratched the surface of. We'll undoubtedly need to come back to it at a later date. Maybe when you've got your research at more publishing phase, it'd be a neat opportunity for us to come back and look at that in more detail as well. So a huge thank you to you, Katrina, for the interview today, and to everyone watching here. Please make sure that you check out the DisruptED TV channel on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe so you can get a new interview each morning delivered fresh in your inbox. Until then, have a fantastic day, and again, thanks, Katrina, and I'll let you say a farewell.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.